Good afternoon and welcome for the panel discussion on COVID's impact on democracy. The corona pandemic is undoubtedly a turning point in our history. Economically, countries are becoming even more protectionist than they earlier were, with enhanced state control over key sectors. Consequently, the principles underlying globalization are being reimagined. Socially, we are seeing deepening fear of outsiders and social ostracism. Societies are also turning insular, seeking solace in traditional forms of social cohesion. Politically, governments are leveraging the pandemic driven lockdowns to further cement themselves. On one hand, they are extending absolute control over parliaments, courts, financial institutions, the police, the bureaucracy. On the other hand, they're circumscribing the political opposition. This has happened in Hungary, Israel, America, and now India. And finally, geopolitically, the pandemic has led to a greater assertion of national sovereignty, further straining of existing multilateral institutions. Clearly, the world is on the cusp of a major reorientation because of COVID. Given this, the topic today is extremely relevant. We are extremely privileged to host Professor Manoj Jha, Member of Parliament and National Spokesperson for the Rashtriya Janata Dal, Professor Neera Chandok, noted political theorist, author and retired professor from Delhi University, and Salil Shetty, former Secretary General of Amnesty International and Director of the UN Millennial Campaign. Professor Jha, before we begin, do you feel that the opposition parties today are being undermined during this pandemic? And if so, what exactly is happening?
Pushparaj, in fact, let me tell you, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, sir.
You know, this pandemic, when it started unfolding, I don't wish to go into the life trajectory of this pandemic and how it unfolded in my country, because unfortunately till 23rd of March, my parliament continued. And I wish to draw your attention and the attention of my panelists who they know. They all know. On 18th of March, some of my Trinamool Congress members, they had worn a mask and they were ridiculed. We didn't know even till then that this ridicule actually has a design. We in fact knew that the Madhya Pradesh government was in fact was on the trajectory of changing the very government, unsettling the very government. You know, it was started with a kind of political consensus, and all of us agreed. All of us joined in spite of the fact that when the first lockdown was announced and the second lockdown was announced, believe me, as a member of parliament and as an opposition member, we saw the conspicuous absence of any clarity with regard to the migrant workforce, yet we, I think, kept our mouth shut. Because we didn't want to tell the government that this is a time where we are trying to convey to you certain truths which could be perceived as that we are actually questioning the very idea of a consolidated, cumulative and collective fight against this pandemic. But then we all know what happened subsequently from the third lockdown to the fourth lockdown and the kind of gory images we saw. You know, meanwhile, many things happened. This consensus which even opposition offered to the government, this consensus was not taken with the letter and the spirit we thought the government will take. 3 weeks after the lockdown, the government was, or the political party which is in center, they started playing the same kind of games which we thought they would not do. Number one, suspension of MP Lad, which was an attack on the very freedom of each member of parliament to work on his or her constituency. And we had even offered that please allow us to work on the health sector, particularly with respect to corona. We have written about it. Let's not get into that. Number one. Meanwhile, during the same phase, while the whole India was fighting this pandemic, apparently so, all political parties, all agencies, in Delhi you saw n number of arrests of student activists from Jamia Millia and other institution. You know, and arrests were made on a ground that you spoke such and such things. And subsequently, Neeraj would tell you, UAPA was put on almost all the arrests which were made. I wish to simply say that enough has happened. All political parties, they must realize that this pandemic has not, in fact, the government response has been actually attacking the very idea of cooperative federalism. Second, the very they have not taken into consideration the autonomy of the state. If you look at it, after the fourth lockdown MHA order, they acknowledge there is something called state. Before that, it appears as if states don't matter, it's only the center. Number three, I'll just put it because after that I'll listen to all my colleagues. Number three, which is very important, that you know what happened. When we spoke about Manrega, the allocation have been enhanced, but they are not talking about enhancement of wages. In many states, which is lesser than the minimum wage of that state, number one. No talk about enhancement of, say, man days. And then subsequently, when the whole world, I wish to draw my attention to my colleague, 4th April, Financial Times, London, which is a flag bearer of neoliberalism. It said that it's time for the states to go for direct cash transfer. It's time for the states to look for a larger role in economic sphere, economic activities. Whereas in our country, contrary to other nations, we have chosen this pandemic or the facade of it or the mask of it to allow greater privatization, to allow FDI unfortunately, Prime Minister spoke about Atmanirbharta, and I shudder to think that allowing 74% in the defense sector, what kind of definition of Atmanirbharta it means. So it's time for the politicians, opposition parties in particular, to shun that very idea of consensus and bring out the issues of the people on ground, digitally to begin with, and really when the lockdown is taken over. That's my opening remark. I'm sure I've taken much time than what you thought I'll take.
No, Professor Jha, that was perfect actually. Professor Chandok, taking from what Professor Jha has just argued, the NDA, in his opinion, has leveraged the pandemic for the cement itself politically at the cost of other opposition parties, and B, impose controversial policy changes on the country. What do you think are the structural and normative shifts that India is undergoing today? And what do you think that this signals for India's democracy?
Well, I think 2 or 3 points. One is that this was a wonderful chance to create a government of national unity, to create a government across opposition parties, as has been happening in times of crisis, notably the 2 world wars. To bring all the existing expertise on board, to advise the leaders how to meet, which was possibly one of the greatest challenges that has faced us, at least in 20 years. That the reluctance to even listen to experts, let alone opposition parties, in fact to delegitimize them, to view them with contempt, is far too obvious, and I think this is going to actually derail democracy, because this government has been doing it since the very beginning, but to derail the opposition. Now the problem is they don't understand that the opposition is also the elected members of the people. They are the representatives of the people. They have the right to be a part of whatever policy is being created. Secondly, in the various speeches made by the leaders of the Bharatiya Janata Party, we see more ballast than any policy measures. I mean, last time when the Prime Minister spoke, I kept listening. Now he will tell us what he is going to do. Now he will tell us after 25 minutes. He said, now I will tell you later when the 4th lockdown will be held. I just say, we are not there to listen. I mean, this is actually, they have gone into the election mode, it seems to me. So they start off with telling us what they have done in the last 6 years, which is not very much, and then what they plan to do. And thirdly, these economic reforms which are being rolled out in the last, 5 years, they have nothing to do with the crisis. Can someone please tell me what they have to do with the current crisis? I mean, every single expert, national, international, has said money into the migrants' hands. You're seeing a major tragedy. You're seeing actually a humanitarian crisis, and they just refuse to do it. They're talking about privatization of airports at this time and this place. I mean, I can't understand what the priorities are. Your people are dying in front of you, and you're talking about handing over airports to private capital. I mean, you can do it. You can do what you want to have a majority, but not at this time, surely. So I'm very unhappy because I think they are not addressing the situation. That is my unhappiness. They lost an opportunity to bring people on board. I mean, Thomas Piketty from France said, put money in their hands. Raghuram Rajan said, I'm ready to come back to India and work for them. No, I don't know who's advising them. It's quite a messy job. That's what I'll say for the moment.
Well, thank you, Professor Shanjog. In fact, many experts, you mentioned Piketty and Raghuram Rajan, but other experts like Noam Chomsky and Tarowski have also argued that similar, what's happening in India is mirrored in other countries as well. And many governments, and especially populist leaders, are leveraging the pandemic to further themselves politically. Salilji, do you think that we are in the midst of a systemic shift globally? I mean, do you think we are heading towards a post-Washington consensus world? I think your audio. Salilji's audio is.
Sorry, that's my fault. I not muted. I'm not unmuted. Sorry. I was just saying that it's very exceptional for the UN Secretary General to speak up on human rights questions on a public stage. But 2 weeks ago, he went public and he said that what the world is facing now is not just a health crisis but a human rights crisis. So there is no question that people like Orban in Hungary and Duterte in the Philippines, and I would argue that our own regime here have used this opportunity to really kind of further create democratic deficits in our countries and kind of further their own parochial agendas using this as an opportunity. So yeah, I mean, in terms of, where are we going and, what is the global scenario? I think it's become an industry now to create scenarios, post-COVID scenarios. My own view is that nobody knows. There's an argument about G-2 because we have the Chinese kind of, doing their own thing and the United States doing its own thing. And India is nowhere in that conversation. So I think we have a huge vacuum on the global stage. There's a direct attack on the World Health Organization, which is a central part of the UN system. So, what the elephants are fighting, China and the United States, and then we are, and the rest of us are all going to be suffering from this battle, I think. But if I can Pushparaj say one or two things about the Indian context. So, because obviously we can come back to the international aspect as well. My own assessment is that what started as a health crisis, at least what we thought was going to be a major health crisis, by choice and by bungling, our government has managed to convert it into a humanitarian crisis and a human rights crisis. So, for all practical purposes, this regime has been anti-democratic, majoritarian, authoritarian. I call them an elected authoritarian regime. So, but what they have done in the last 2 months is, systematically increase the attack on Dalits, on minorities, on the lowest caste. We call them migrant laborers, but if you look at who these migrant laborers are, they are essentially the lowest caste, and the attack on domestic violence on women is increased. So all the kind of fault lines we have been exacerbated. So a systematic further diminishing of democratic institutions, crushing dissent, state-sponsored bigotry, and destroying the economy of the poor. Examples have already been given by the other panelists, but what we are seeing is a very systematic way in which this is happening, because it's a combination of incompetence, it's a combination of panic, and it is a combination of the majoritarian law and order police state instincts of this regime, in my view. Thank you.
Thanks, Salilji. I mean, there's a lot to say and a lot to process from what you've said, but I want to pick up one point from what you said, something about the fact that this humanitarian crisis could have been avoided. You seem to suggest that if the state governments and the central governments had got their act together, this migrant crisis, this exodus that has happened, could have been avoided. Do you feel, Salilji, that there is more to this than meets the eye? That this is not just an unforeseen consequence of a lockdown?
First of all, I think, what happened was that we looked at the data coming from the West. So we've not really looked at what's happening in developing countries. Because if you look at, we're going on saying how brilliant India is performing, which is absolute nonsense. We are performing worse than our South Asian neighbors. We are performing worse than the major developing countries. If you take like Indonesia, Nigeria, etc. Because the two key metrics are how many cases we have and what's the death rate. Now, how many cases we have, we don't know because we are not testing, and it's not realistic to test 1.3 billion people anyway. But on the death rate, it is ridiculous for us to be comparing ourselves with the richest countries in the world. We have a much younger demographic, etc. So we know the big differences, but we are constantly, deliberately, in my view, comparing ourselves with benchmarking against countries and populations which are not relevant reference points for us. So is this a deliberate kind of game which we are playing? From a headline management point of view, it is a deliberate game. And of course, we have a lapdog media which simply kind of repeats whatever the government propaganda is. There's only one or two people who speak the truth, and as soon as you speak the truth, you are in big trouble. So I think the one is that it is the panic and its incompetence, as I said, and they're using this opportunity to systematically further their agenda. So I have no doubt about it, because the fact is that, interestingly, I would say, and I don't know if there's any study that's been systematically done so far because it's early days. Interestingly, I think a lot of the non-BJP run states are actually doing a better job of tackling this. Of course, Kerala is a shining example. But I think Maharashtra is also very interesting, the way in which they are dealing with this. So I think there's some work to be done as to, if you have a hyper-centralized, narcissistic style of regime, I don't think it works well with a situation, an epidemic situation like this, where you actually need a much more interactive, listening to the population, understanding the crisis and taking an adaptive approach. This government is, they throw the kitchen sink, everything is done centrally, it's hyper-bureaucratized, and there's only two people making any decisions in this government, as we know.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Salil.
You mentioned that, Pushkar? Across the world, we see this phenomena of executives completely suspending parliaments and even the judiciary. Netanyahu has done it in Israel, Putin has done it in Russia, Orban has done it in Hungary, and of course Bolsonaro has done it in Brazil. Now, in a way, they have given themselves the kind of power that dictators did not give themselves even during the wars. Because they have, for example, the president of Israel has not only suspended the judiciary, he has put off the cases that were filed against him for corruption. Bolsonaro has completely suspended all representative institutions. So it strikes me that this phenomena of the executive looming large over parliaments and completely appropriating the power of every organ of government is confined to a phenomena we call right-wing populism. Because you do not see this in the case of Germany, and Angela Merkel has done very well, and the president of New Zealand. Because they do not fall within the populism, but this whole nature of populism, and he used the right word, Mr. Shetty, narcissistic completely, we know it all, and swinging people by their empty rhetoric. And what is bothering me of course, it was mentioned that communalism has made, right at the center of it all is communalism. And what is bothering me is, I live in a colony in South Delhi, not far from where you stay, Pushpraj. I'm in Defence Colony. The kind of authoritarianism that is being exercised by the RWAs. I mean, there was a time Sheila Dikshit introduced this whole notion of bhagidari. Everybody, I mean, you are told what to do, where to do, and then they will photograph people, they'll put them on the wall. Ye ho kya raha hai? I think actually the nastiest streams of our society have been unearthed during this pandemic. We are not only communal, and the middle class colonies are very, very communal. We are also very authoritarian. We've all become, in the words of the Bible, our brother's keeper. I mean, we've all become a microcosm of what things are at the top. And there comes a point when you say, what is this business of naming and shaming? We know what we're doing. Of course, we're all law-abiding citizens. We don't do. But we didn't clap and we didn't bang thalis. I mean, my brother and I, we live in a one house. We were not going to do it. And suddenly we find neighbors saying, why didn't you? Why should we do it? We're not going to do it. So in a way, I think we're going to come out worse than before. We are not a very humanitarian society. And I have heard some terrible things being uttered about the migrants by perfectly families and friends, and even in the news, and even in television anchors, the kind of things they are saying, some of them, that we are actually going to come out as a very, very terrible society. I'm really worried about what we've become.
Well, yes, ma'am. I mean, what you're saying is actually something all of us have been feeling. I want to go back to something which Salilji said and again Professor Jha right now. He spoke about headline management and narcissism. I mean, the current leadership that this country has, especially the Prime Minister, has often projected strength and, the idea that let us moi, the state is I. So that personalization of the pandemic and the triumph of the symbolic, that is something that has characterized this government for the last 6 years, and especially now. Professor Jha, do you think that the Indian government's response to the pandemic is lacking in substance?
I'll tell you, Pushparaji, I was listening to my colleagues, Salilji and Professor Chandok. I would give it to my Prime Minister that he can capitalize on anything, including a pandemic. He can build up anything, including a pandemic. And his response to pandemic has been grossly unscientific. I say this, all acts of solidarity, that's all fine. But when you are fighting a pandemic, you need to have a scientific approach. I come from a state where many doctors they don't have PPE. They use gamcha and they work. Instead of addressing those issues, Mr. Prime Minister did precisely what he is good at. And in fact, I would again say that he gets away with it. Number one. Number two, a majoritarian ethos, what Professor Chandok was offering, authoritarianism, that has become part of my society. I can't blame only Prime Minister. We have become one like that. I'll just quote, at the risk of crossing the line of contempt of court. One lawyer, pro-people lawyer, approaches the court about wages to the migrant workforce. And the courts had the audacity to say that when they are getting free food, what is the use of wages? So wages and food, they were equated. I don't know where in the world you will get such kind of wisdom from the highest court of the land, number one. Number two, the other day, a prayer was with regard to sensitizing the state about migrant workforce. The highest court of the land, with which we have lots of hope, the highest court of land said that if people sleep on track, they move out, what can we do? The prayer was not for that. The prayer was for sensitizing the state to take care of the migrant workforce. Now, the third thing which Prime Minister did not touch base with or chose to ignore, and brazenly so, that the pandemic is not first gender neutral, class neutral or caste neutral. We have all seen, when you look at the plight, it does not, I mean, his entire approach, I would tell you, Pushparaji, while addressing the nation on different occasions, was addressing the concerns of 10% of our population. His metaphor, the simile he used, it was not meant for others. And frankly, the last point I'll tell you, why I blame my political establishment. Believe me, I was also amongst millions of those. When the first lockdown was announced, the migrant workforce did not, in fact, come in my imagination at least. It came to my imagination because I also belong to that 10-12% of population. When Prime Minister asked, stay home, stay safe, we never realized that the idea of home is not a privilege of only middle class or upper middle class. The home is a psychological space apart from being a physical space, and that applies to migrant workforce, जो कि गुड़गांव में 10 by 10 के कमरे में 20 लोग रहते हैं. And then Prime Minister, together with the world leaders, popularized a term which is going to disturb our collective conscience for very long, that is social distancing. Professor Chandok would agree that we used to have a Bogardus scale about social distancing, Professor Chandok, and that was all about how do we deal with ethnicity. Now realize in our country where already we had lots of social distance, this term has got legitimacy. I think on the whole, if I look at your question, basically Pushparaji, I very frankly believe that while the government has failed, we also have not done substantial. But for us, it's time that if we continue talking, I mean, one possible thing which many of my friends in opposition also may not agree. I was trying to read out a few lines for all of you, and I refer to this of Financial Times editorial on 4th of April, if I'm not wrong. Radical reforms reversing the prevailing policy direction of the last 4 decades will need to be put on the table. Governments will have to accept a more active role in the economy. They must see public services as investment rather than liabilities and look for ways to make labor markets less insecure. What have we done? Quite the contrary. Now, labor laws are being decimated. You have seen how the financial package, the stimulus package, which I believe is an oxymoron itself. Now, I believe this is what it has done to the political discourse in last few days. That's all I had to say, Pushparaji.
Professor Jha, thank you. We are out of time now, but thank you all for this discussion. Rabindranath Tagore once argued that he hoped that the world would not be broken up into narrow domestic wars, and yet here we are. Keeping aside our ideological and partisan blinkers, we have to objectively weigh the NDA's responses to the pandemic, given it has implications for our democracy. Is it doing enough? Has it done enough? These are questions we must ask ourselves now. And finally, I leave you with this question. Just how long are we prepared to endure this? Thank you so much, Professor Jha, Professor Chandok, and Salilji for your time. And I also want to thank Swaraj Express and the Samruddha Bharat team for their support. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you.